Hey guys, welcome back. This is Thelefevrefever, and today we are here for another restoration video. As you can see with this 04 locomotive in front of us here, I don't know the exact make of this locomotive, and so that's why I kind of alluded to it in the title itself. I might find out later on, or one of you guys down in the comments can tell me what this locomotive actually is. But now let's get on to the restoration part of this video, and let's just test how the locomotive is running. First of all, I'm gonna make sure the tender wheel is on. Looked like that came off just a little bit. Now let's start it in forwards. Luckily it does seem to be running, although it is a little jittery. Oh. That's an interesting sign. There's some sort of gear slippage. The motor kicked in reverse before it actually, put any power behind the wheels. Alright, I'm going to carry this on over to the workstation before I accidentally break anything. Alright, now we got the locomotive down here on the workbench. I'm going to try and open it up. First I'm just going to take the tender off, set that off to the side. I'll go ahead and clean that off camera. Now the locomotive itself, I believe the body is just held on with a few pieces. One of those being a screw down here. Is a very short screw though. Trying to see if there's a screw inside of there, but I can't really see anything if there is one. Trying to get there. Now let's try to get the body off. You have to wiggle it kind of around the cab just a little bit. I have taken the body off once before, so that's kind of how I know how to take this off. Here we go. There's the locomotive. These two parts I'm going to clean off camera. Now we have the actual engine itself. You can see all the gears and the drivetrain here, as well as the light. I don't know if that light was working earlier. We can go ahead and check a little bit later when we have some of this cleaned up a bit more. The wheels themselves seem to be fairly clean, although those could use a little bit of a scrub. But now let's try to open up this locomotive even more. Try to see if there's a place to access the underside. Doesn't seem to be. And I can't see a way to, there, never mind. See a way to open the motor. Gonna go ahead and start with that and then work down to the gears and all the wheels after that. There we go. Oof, you can see how dirty that is. It's a nice black ring. Just set the two brushes off to the side. Grab the spring with them. Put these in a box so I don't lose them. All right, now set these two screws up there too. All right, now it's time to clean this commutator here. I'm gonna use my typical method of just an eraser and scrubbing at it. I don't know if I can actually move it. No, I can't. So I'm just gonna try to hold it in place with one finger, come in with another, wipe that down. You can already see most of this gunk here is oil and other particulates like that. So I'll just do the rest of this off camera quickly. All right, now I have wiped down the actual plates of the commutator. Now it's time to clean the gaps in between them. To do that, I'm going to use a toothpick, something that is softer than the metal itself. These gaps are fairly shallow anyway, so they didn't have a tendency to catch that much, but it still doesn't hurt to clean them out. All right, now let's try and refit the brushes. One thing I'm going to do is take this spring here. You see how it's a little wonky. grab a smaller screwdriver. Try to straighten it back up. There we go, that's a little bit better. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it still will help the locomotive just that tiny bit more. It's always fun trying to put the brushes back in these locomotives. But this one is a nice design where the brushes and the springs stick into each other. And so now let's attempt to put these two back together. I might have to do this off camera if I can't line it up properly. I can see the two brushes inside of there. I don't know if you guys really can. Now I'm going to try and screw it back together. I'll do a quick test to make sure that the motor and the brushes are in their proper places. Then we can get on to cleaning the rest of this locomotive. I think one screw will be good enough for now, in case I have to take it back apart, but let's go ahead and test that now. All right, now we're on the little test track segment here, so let's just test it, starting in forwards. All right, it is back, and it is also picking up power at a lot lower voltage, and it's tending to be a little bit more speedy, even with incremental movements on the controller. And you can also tell now that the light is working, so hopefully there shouldn't be anything that I have to do to fix that. But now let's get this locomotive back onto the workbench. All right, now I've set the other screw in place, and when I was testing that locomotive, I did a little bit off camera. It seemed that when the motor was slipping, it was slipping on this big black gear here. Or this would spin, but the rest of the mechanism wouldn't spin. So there's obviously a gear up here at this silver axle that goes into the big black gear. There's a gear in between, a drive gear, a middle gear, and then another drive gear. So it was slipping right on that one where you can just see my nail pointing at. I don't know what's up with that. When I spin it with my hand, most of the time it works. And there's no replacement parts that I have for this. Like you saw when I was running it earlier, when you sped it up slowly, it didn't have any issues with it slipping out or anything like that. But when I turned up the controller a little bit quicker on it, a few times off camera, it tended to just slip out a little bit and just sit there with the motor just spinning but nothing actually happening. Before we lubricate any of the gear set here, I'm just going to go ahead and clean some of it off here with a Q-tip. Does seem to be a fair amount of old grease stuck on here. I will of course replace it with my own. Just want to dap this in just a little bit. You can see the grime that's all in here and on the wheel sets. I even spin it by hand since the ratio is designed that way. You can also easily see all of the brass pickups on either side. Of course, this locomotive is all self-contained, so there's no tender pickups or anything like that. Now that we've cleaned that off, I'm going to come in with some Label 102. This is a common lubricant for modeling. It even says so on the bottle. I'm going to hit up the joints for the linkages, as well as the axles themselves. I will hit the gears eventually, but not with this Label lubricant. Here we go. I'm gonna spin some of that in. we go. Before I add any grease that'll easily pick up some stuff, I'm gonna come in here and grind the running gear a little bit. Just take off a little bit of that rust on it all. It does get a little bent, so I'll have to bend it back. But after a little bit of scrubbing, you can see that there's less rust there now. So I'll go ahead and do that to both sides and then get back to you guys after that. All right, I cleaned up those rods just a little bit here. I tried not to damage them any further than I could from just, bending it back in place. I did clean up the wheels a little bit. To do that, I did a pretty simple method. If you watched my videos before, you've probably seen me do this, where I just take a track bright and stick it underneath the wheel and grind it for a little bit, making sure to get the flange, and then just spinning it for a little bit, and then fitting that section as well. All right, now let's get to adding some grease to this locomotive. To do that, I'll just be using some lithium grease, and I'll apply it using a toothpick. Just gonna add a minuscule amount, so sometimes it can actually make these slipping issues a little bit worse. Try to get it on the teeth and not the wheels themselves. That should be enough. Now we'll clean up the excess with a Q-tip. There you go. All right, now I ran the locomotive a little bit more to get that lubricant in, and I seem to have identified the issue with this gear in here. It's on my nail. There is a very small bit of it that is just the teeth are ground off a little bit. If I try to get that. There. It's a little hard to see, but those teeth on the top side are ground down a little bit. I don't have any spare replacements, so there's nothing I can really do about it. But that's as best as I can fix the inside of this locomotive. Now that we have the interior cleaned to the best of my ability, now let's grab the parts for the shell of this locomotive and start putting it back together. Starting with this underside piece. Grab this little screw to go along with it. And now for the shell of this locomotive. I cleaned it off twice, which is more than I normally clean the shells of these locomotives off. This one is really stubborn. It was really caked with a lot of gunk on it. Oop, that's gonna be an issue. There we go. Now it should be fit down in place, so now it's time to put that bottom piece on. All right, now I'm gonna try and fit this on the right way. Gotta tuck it in just a little bit so that it sits flat in the locomotive. As well as so this short screw can actually fit in. All right, now let's take this locomotive back to the test track for one last final time. All right, now let's test the locomotive's performance now. Mind you, it will have a few issues with that slipping gear. There, like how it just suddenly decided to stop. There's nothing I can really do about this locomotive, so it probably won't see that much running. And another thing I discovered when I was cleaning the tender here, as you can tell, is I scratched off the black paint to show the old Santa Fe lettering. Might try to clean that up a little bit more. That was kind of accidental. I was scrubbing it and apparently I cleaned it a little too hard. Also, I did lubricate the axles on the tender, and I also did accidentally break the little post for the tender to connect to the locomotive. That's why I'm not having it behind it right now. I'm letting that all dry before I put it behind the locomotive itself, but I think this tender turned out fairly nice. So now let's actually test the slow speed of the locomotive itself. It's going to turn up slowly. There. That was the first speed it started at, and that's the first speed it starts at in reverse. Of course, it slipped out on that slip gear. All right, now this wraps up the restoration of this locomotive. I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching and make it towards the end here. In this restoration, we cleaned the body to the best avail that I could. There's still quite a bit of gunk that is caked in, but I tried to get a lot more of these intricate areas cleaned up. We cleaned the tender up, lubricated all of that. Accidentally broke the post, so I had to glue that back in place. Lubricated the gear set as well as cleaning up the commutator underneath. There's nothing I can do about that slipping gear issue, so that'll just kind of prevail. So I might not run this locomotive that much. Next week, we should be working on this Bachmann 060 locomotive, as you can see here. I asked you guys in a poll which one you'd pick to restore first, and you guys chose the 040. In the end now, I did actually discover it is a Lima product, as it says on the tender and inside the locomotive itself. I don't know what specific model, but I'll put it up here for you guys to see there. And so I'll have a lot of fun next week opening this 060 up, and I had a lot of fun this week with cleaning up this locomotive. And I'd like to thank you guys again, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!